What is the secret formula to building a successful startup? What are the ingredients that you need to take an idea, a vision of a future product or service, and turn it into a scalable, sustainable, and profitable business with hundreds of crores in revenue and a multi-billion-dollar valuation in an industry dominated by capital-hungry, loss-making behemoths? Well, it looks like three guys in Mumbai have figured it out. They have this formula seemingly in their pocket, and they're using it to heavily disrupt India's higher education space. Now, before we get started, I just want to say that a lot of the research that went into this video was actually borrowed from an article written by a junior VC titled, "Can upGrad upgrade India's higher education future?" And we use that, of course, with their permission. So if you want to do any further reading after this video is over, then you can find a link to that article in the description down below. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's talk about Mayank Kumar's entry into the world of startups, because it actually echoes the experiences that a lot of other Indian startup founders have had. Go to an IIT, then get some management experience at a business school, and then work at a consulting firm advising companies. And it was while he was doing this, while advising specifically education companies, that Mayank began to identify holes in Indian education. For example, he discovered that brick and mortar higher education was reaching less than a quarter of TAM. That's 150 million people that make up the total addressable market who should be in college but aren't. And Mayank saw this as a massive opportunity. So Mayank ended up sharing his thoughts with two of his consulting colleagues. They'd all worked together at Parthenon Group, and when Mayank explained the market opportunity, it seemed obvious to all three of them that higher education in India going online wasn't just an opportunity, but actually a guaranteed eventuality. Now, at around this same time, serial entrepreneur Ronnie Screwala, well known for building UTV, sold his controlling stake in the company to Disney for a reported 2,000 crore rupees. He was a crorepati now, and he didn't want to hang his hat and retire. Instead, he began investing this money into fledgling companies through his own venture capital firm, Unilaser Ventures. And it was while searching for exciting startups to add to Unilaser's portfolio that Ronnie came across Mayank and his two colleagues, Ravijot Chugh and Phalgun Kompalli. Now, at this point, the venture was still very much in the ideation stage. It was just a hypothesis, really, but Ronnie had actually been dreaming about starting a company either in the healthcare or education space for some time now. Being an investor was fun for him, yes, but entrepreneurship was really what Ronnie was passionate about. And so when Mayank shared this idea with him, he was ready to make a move, not just as an investor, but also as a founder. By January of 2015, Ronnie had officially joined Mayank, Phalgun, and Ravijot as a co-founder, and he also made a seed stage investment of $16 million into the company, which was at that time something that he had rebranded to UEducation, in keeping with his company naming structure of UTV, Unilaser, and now UEducation. Now, the actual registered company, which we now know today as upGrad Education Private Limited, had actually been around since 2012, presumably as a placeholder for whatever Mayank Kumar would be building in the education space in the future. Now, talking about this exciting new company, UEducation, he said that our goal would be to foster the next level of degree education and learning and train the next generation of Indian workforce to take on the industries of the future. This sentiment was echoed by Ronnie Screwala, who said that the sector is ready for disruption and innovation. So what was the disruption and innovation that UEducation will be bringing to India's higher education space? Well, I already mentioned earlier that the lack of offline higher education market penetration was one gap that online higher education could fill, but another opportunity was the disconnect between traditional college curriculums and industry requirements. Gone were the days when one degree would sufficiently prepare somebody for the remainder of their career. In fact, today, it isn't uncommon for textbooks and lectures in a college classroom to already be obsolete by the time a student graduates. Modern day professionals need to constantly upskill themselves to keep up with the rapidly changing industries that they're a part of. But here's the catch. Going back to school isn't something that most employees or even freelancers are open to considering. Taking 4 months or more to attend a physical college just isn't realistic, which of course is where upGrad comes in. Their first course was a 12-week rigorous online entrepreneurship program that taught students through live lectures, case studies, group assignments, and guidance. Now, this course cost 50,000 rupees, which is not a small amount of money when you remember that online education was still a very new concept in 2015 in India. In fact, many people advised upGrad's founders to offer their courses for free to increase adoption, but after thinking it over, they decided to make a contrarian bet by charging money for this startup course instead of making it free. The thinking here was that 1, people who pay for a course are actually more likely to complete it than people who get it for free because they want to get their money's worth, and 2, upGrad's target customer actually has money. They're mainly salaried employees with decent jobs. In the first cohort, 67% of upGrad students had upwards of 3 years of work experience, and 62% of them were 25 and above. These are people who would genuinely prefer to pay for a high-quality educational experience than get a low-quality educational experience for free. And this hypothesis was ultimately successful. This first batch of 100 students had a completion rate of 95+%. Now, this first startup program was really just a test, an MVP of sorts, a minimum viable product. It was taught mainly by upGrad themselves, along with a couple of people that they brought in from successful startup companies, but this wasn't going to be the long-term structure that these programs would take. upGrad planned to step back out of the teaching role and into a more administrative role, so that rather than becoming an OEM, an original education manufacturer, like for example Byju's or Unacademy, they would instead tie up with IITs and global universities to create online-only courses specifically for upGrad students. These courses would be very similar to the kinds of courses that you get in an actual offline college experience, but with a few key differences. Firstly, they'd be more focused and specific, given that the purpose of the course was to upskill professionals who already understood a lot of the prerequisite information that a college student probably wouldn't. And secondly, the courses would be more flexible, with a targeted time commitment of just 1 to 2 hours per day. upGrad understood that a lot of their students have full-time jobs and families to take care of too, whereas your average college student is single, living on campus, and doesn't have a lot of responsibility outside of academia. By June of 2016, upGrad was saying goodbye to their first batch of students, and we're also gearing up for the launch of some new programs too. A 9-month data analytics program, a 6-month digital marketing program, and a 6-month product management program. These were exciting times at the company, but they were also challenging times. After that initial success with their first batch of students, the upGrad team had begun to face a new struggle: prospective customer resistance. They were trying to onboard new students for these new programs, but because of the nascent state that online education was in India at that time in 2016, and because upGrad was still a very new name in India's education space, a lot of people were hesitant to sign up with and pay for upGrad's programs, which is where their combination approach became extremely valuable. But what exactly was this combination approach? Well, like I mentioned earlier, during upGrad's first batch, they did a lot of the teaching themselves, because at that time, they didn't have the partnerships with universities that they did later on. But what they did have, and this was their unfair advantage, which they had through Ronnie Screwala, was access to industry experts. They were connected with entrepreneurs at companies like Make My Trip, Zomato, Pepperfry, and so on. And I know that I hinted at this earlier, but I wanted to bring it up again now because they saw a tremendous response from their students because of this, which is why they continued the practice of pairing practitioners, people who are actually active in the spaces that they're teaching about, with educators. The idea here was to combine industry experts with professors and teachers. And this combination approach was, as a junior VC put it, the secret sauce for upGrad. Remember that data analytics program that I mentioned earlier? Well, it would end up featuring a partner at Tata IQ, the CEO of Gramener, the CSO of Fractal, along with professors at IIITB. The digital marketing program? Well, it featured the head of corporate marketing at HCL and the head of digital marketing at Facebook Asia Pacific and a number of professors from MICA. This was the upGrad edge, the X factor that differentiated its programs from the programs of offline higher education institutions, which weren't able to attract so many talented industry experts because they were offline. They had to rely on local experts in their city most of the time, and they had to convince these experts to essentially take a day or two off from their jobs to come and teach, which is a very big ask. But upGrad's ask was far more reasonable. Get on a quick video call or stand in front of a camera and teach OTT, over the top. No flights, no cabs, no taking leave, just the internet. By the end of 2018, this innovative approach had taken upGrad's student base from 100 to upwards of 15,000. They tied up with multiple higher education institutions, including the University of Cambridge, IMT Ghaziabad, BITS Bolani, IIITB, and MICA. And they'd also started teaming up with recruiting partners to ensure that upGrad graduates could get placements right out of their programs. Things were going really well at the startup, and besides Ronnie's initial $16 million investment, upGrad hadn't needed to raise any money. Their business was sustainable. Now, to understand why that's the case, we need to take a closer look at upGrad's business model, because like I mentioned earlier, upGrad isn't an OEM, an original education manufacturer. Their business isn't built around creating content. They do have some courses and programs which they've created internally, but those aren't their primary revenue drivers. They don't publish textbooks, they don't have physical campuses or professors on their payroll. They are an intermediary first and foremost, an online aggregator of universities, just like Zomato and Swiggy are online aggregators of restaurants. Now, just like with Swiggy and Zomato, there is a bit of work required to prepare and package the food, or in the case of upGrad, the program. An offline course needs to be digitally recorded and then packaged into a user-friendly online educational experience. But that packaging actually happens at the restaurant, or in this case, the university. So upGrad actually pays higher education institutions money to develop and promote these online programs. But now we need to answer a very important question. Where does this money actually come from? What is the origin of upGrad's revenue? Well, you might be surprised to find this out, but a large portion of it actually doesn't come from their students. Instead, upGrad takes a commission from the university every time a student enrolls in that university's program via the upGrad platform. And these commissions actually make up a majority of upGrad's revenue. They then take some of that revenue and use it to continue funding the preparation and packaging of new programs from the universities. So those commissions make up just over 50% of upGrad's revenue, and the bulk of the remainder of their revenue, about 49%, comes directly from students in the form of enrollment fees. So in other words, they're using a sort of split revenue model here, which is very similar to food delivery startups like Swiggy and Zomato. upGrad is the intermediary, and so they're taking half of their revenue from students and half from universities, which is not a bad deal at all. And so by the end of the financial year of 2020, upGrad was doing really well for themselves. More than 300,000 students had passed through the programs that they were offering, and 20,000 active students were using the platform. They were offering dozens of programs. Their revenues had nearly doubled from 85 crore rupees in the financial year of 2019 to 163 crore rupees in the financial year of 2020. But this was growth. It wasn't scale. To sustain the trajectory that the company was on, they were burning through a lot of money. Their losses shot up 84% during that financial year to 79 crore rupees, and yet, in spite of these losses, upGrad still hadn't raised external funding. And this was likely a byproduct of Ronnie Screwala's perspective on fundraising, which is that most entrepreneurs today only have a business plan for until their next funding round. However, entrepreneurs should focus on building sound business models rather than attracting investors. And this is clearly what upGrad had been doing from 2015 to 2019. And while they were losing money, it seemed like they had a plan. In the company's financial statements, it was clear that upGrad was losing money in a calculated way on the basis of future business plans and financial support from its promoters. However, as Michael Gerard Tyson once eloquently put it, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And for upGrad and the rest of India's startup ecosystem, this punch came in the form of a global pandemic. The upGrad team began working from home after India's first wave of lockdowns were imposed in March of 2020, and this was a difficult transition for the company. By April of that same year, upGrad had imposed salary cuts to the tune of 30% for its employees. Speaking about staff working remotely, Mayank Kumar said that we sensed anxiety, apprehension amongst employees on when the office will resume. Few people who have gone back to their hometowns and those who are planning to go were uncertain on their next steps. Keeping everybody's well-being in mind, we declared work from home till December 31st, 2020. Now, this was obviously a tough call to make. Deciding to send employees home and prioritize their health and their well-being above productivity isn't something that every company was able to do. But upGrad's response to the pandemic was measured and realistic, bordering on pessimistic. The company was preparing for the worst, and what ended up happening was the complete opposite. By the end of 2020, upGrad's revenue had grown by 100%. They'd crossed 1 million learners across 50 countries and delivered 10 million hours of learning experience to their students. Oh, and those salary cuts? Well, they were actually totally refunded to upGrad's employees in 2021. They also raised their first external capital, which was $6.7 million in debt funding from IIFL, and they followed this round up with a $9.3 million venture round from Ronnie's Unilaser Ventures in April of 2021. And then $185 million from Temasek, the World Bank's IFC, and IIFL in a round that closed in August of 2021. This final round round of 2021 brought their valuation, which was unknown at the beginning of 2021, to $1.2 billion, which would be cause for celebration for most companies, but Ronnie Screwala was solemn, saying, yes, the last value was $1.2 billion, but as I keep saying, we are not a fan of the tag name unicorn. For us, it is only a means to a much larger goal. What was that goal? Well, in the same statement, Ronnie spelled it out clearly for everybody to see. He said that we are very focused on our path to being in the top 3 to 5 companies globally in edtech. Now, if we read between the lines here, what Ronnie was really saying is that they were very focused on beating out the dozens of other companies that upGrad didn't want to share the edtech winners podium with. Being number 3, 4, or 5 would mean outperforming all of the other competing online education brands that were snapping at their heels. And there are 2 companies in particular that I want to highlight here: Simplilearn and Eruditus, upGrad's core competitors. Now, Simplilearn is more focused on upskilling their students in niche areas of the digital economy, stuff like AI and ML, cybersecurity, cloud computing, stuff like that. That's the corner of the market that they've sectioned off for themselves. Eruditus, on the other hand, focuses on executive education for mid-career professionals. But upGrad, well, they've chosen to be less focused. They offer higher education to the masses, with programs targeting a wide variety of segments. But all 3 of these players have 2 things in common. 1, they've partnered with universities around the world to offer their programs to students, and 2, they're aggressively trying to outcompete each other. So if you were wondering why upGrad had suddenly raised a bunch of external capital in 2021 after being virtually 100% owned by its founders up until that point, well, that's why. They needed venture capital to grow as quickly as possible. This wasn't the time to scale, to worry about breaking even, or even being sustainable. It was time to floor it, to rush ahead and try to capture as much of the market as possible, which is exactly what they did. In 2021, upGrad tripled their course offerings. They scaled their university partnerships, they closed 3 acquisitions, and so saying that the COVID-19 pandemic was good for upGrad would be an understatement. It completely transformed both their company individually and also India's entire edtech space. Back in 2017, KPMG and Google predicted that the entire edtech space in India would reach a valuation of $1.96 billion, with higher online education making up just $184 million of that. That's less than 10%. So it's pretty obvious that the pandemic had a massive impact on upGrad's growth. Their valuation alone by the end of 2021 was upwards of 60% of KPMG and Google's predicted valuation of India's entire edtech space, and it was more than 6x the predicted valuation of India's online higher education space. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic wasn't gonna last forever. As Indian citizens began to vaccinate themselves and as cases of COVID-19 decreased, the world of offline education in India saw a resurgence. Schools and colleges opened back up, and many edtech companies that had initially set out to take education online found themselves scrambling to set up offline education centers. Unacademy, Byju's, and yes, even PhysicsWallah have made huge pushes into offline learning in 2022, and upGrad is one of these companies. After raising $225 million in June of 2022, upGrad opened a number of offline experience centers in cities across India. And according to upGrad's business head, Jitinder Singh, our revenue went up by 3.2x through these offline centers in Q1 of the financial year of 2023. And I think that this statement is an indicator of something different happening at upGrad. Because while the rest of India's edtech space was busy shutting down or laying people off, I'm talking about White Hat Junior, Unacademy, Vedantu, Lido Learning, and several others, upGrad was actually growing sustainably. In fact, in the first 3 months of 2022, they were actually profitable. Their revenue had seen a 150% growth, reaching an ARR of $300 million, and this resulted in a 70% gross margin across all of their income streams, which allowed them to start thinking globally. Our focus on profitability only powers us to impact at a much larger scale and make online learning accessible and affordable, and with the right cost model anywhere in the world. And that was Mayank Kumar, by the way. So upGrad is now thinking outside of India. They've set up a study abroad program for students who want to learn in countries outside of India, and are even giving out $100 million in scholarships in collaboration with Golden Gate University in San Francisco for upGrad students to study abroad. And this is just one of 18 international partnerships across the United States, the UK, Australia, Canada, and Germany that upGrad has established. They're expanding globally in a big way. And their belief is that in the future, they'll derive between 30 30 and 40% of their revenue from international markets. But the fact that this isn't just growth, that this is something that they're trying to do profitably and scalably is huge, both for the company directly, but also for their current and future employees. Here's Mayank Kumar again talking to CNBC in July of 2022. In this fiscal year, we will go up to 2,000 to 3,000 or more people. Every week, I'm sitting with an open position of about 250 plus. Many of our new businesses, whether it is to study abroad, short skill certification, etc., will require the right sort of people coming in. So, the last question that I want to answer here is, how has upGrad been able to do all this? How is it that they're actively raising funds, hiring tons of people, expanding globally, and all of that during a funding winter that is causing their competitors in India's edtech space to lay people off and cut costs? Well, Ronnie Screwala actually answered this exact question in March of 2022, when he said that our obsessions for outcomes for all our learners, coupled with our global best-in-class 85% completion track record that leads to a high referral, word of mouth, and repeat learner base from over 50 plus countries, in part has contributed to our growth. In other words, it's upGrad's focus on quality over quantity, on adding value over adding customers, and their very capital efficient model of positioning themselves as an intermediary between students and colleges. Rather than spending huge amounts of money creating content themselves as an OEM, it's these things that have enabled upGrad to succeed where others are failing. And the fact that their business wasn't reliant upon the pandemic, that convenient online higher education is in demand irrespective of whether colleges are open or closed, means that upGrad will always have a customer base, and a global one at that too. So what does all this mean for the future of the company? Well, they're actually planning on going public in 2023. upGrad's founders are going to be diluting their collective stake in the company to 51%, meaning that they still have control over the direction that the company takes, and a hostile takeover isn't possible, at least not in the near term. Today, upGrad has a goal of $2 billion gross revenue by 2026, and while it's unclear whether the profitability that they saw in Q4 of the financial year of 2022 will continue into the financial year of 2023, sustainability is definitely one of upGrad's core company values, which is what it's going to take for Mayank, Phalgun, and Ronnie to achieve their goal of becoming one of the top 3 to top 5 companies globally in edtech. They've shown the world that they're not just another Indian edtech company, they are actually one of the leaders here. And with money in its bank and wind in its sails, upGrad looks set to upgrade Indian higher education.